All right. Just give us a heads up when we think it's running.
You should be good.
Cool. Thank you, Shannon. All right. Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. Great to see you guys. Thanks as always for being here and being on time. So today is our 12th meeting for the Energy Code Board, and per usual, we've got a lot of really great stuff to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And just wanted to let folks know that today Adam is at the ACEEE summer study and got scheduled to present on a panel directly at the same time as this meeting. So he'll be with us for the first 10 minutes and then he'll have to jump off. So before we dive in today, I wanted to give Adam the floor just to share a quick update. Oh, cool. And we're recording. To share a quick update on some follow-up conversations he was able to have with the leadership at Colorado Energy Office to answer the question that we kind of left off at the end of last session, which was, will the Energy Office be able to create a tool to help folks navigate whatever the code changes or the C406 changes we make are? And so Adam, I've got a slide with some words, but I'll just pass it over to you to share that update, and I'll move to that slide.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Kim. And apologies, everyone, in advance for any background noise you may hear. I'm in a very large, busy room. But essentially, just I think what Kim said is exactly what I wanted to share, is that, we had all talked about after the last, or during the last meeting, about, concerns over complexity of C406 and the ability for, design teams and builders to, one, plan for how credits would be achieved under C406, but then also how to clearly, calculate those and demonstrate which credits were selected, and all of that complexity, as C406 has become more complex in the base code. And so, there have been some suggestions. I think it may have been Elizabeth or maybe a collection of folks who had suggested that, this is somewhere that the Energy Office could potentially step in and try to create some resources to help, design professionals, help local governments understand and simplify compliance and planning with those requirements of the code, so that, even if we can't necessarily make the code itself more simplified, that we can at least make planning and compliance with the code more simplified and straightforward. So I just wanted to share that we've had internal conversations on that, and that we are going to make the commitment that we will dedicate resources. That may look like developing a tool, it may look like developing training and other resources, it may look like a combination of efforts, and we are not necessarily sure 100% right now today what that is going to look like, but that we do have funding that we can dedicate to making sure that we are able to develop those resources or tools or training or whatever ultimately is necessary to help design teams and builders and local governments more easily comply with this code. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, because I know that there have been some concerns raised about the complexity, and I think that there were some concerns about, well, if it's already as complex as it is, do we want to be doing anything that require makes it stronger or changes it in some way? And I certainly from the Energy Office's perspective, we do not want that to be the limiting factor that prevents the board from feeling comfortable with perhaps strengthening requirements or changing requirements. So I just wanted to share with all of you that update, and happy to chat about it for a few minutes here or answer any questions you all might have.
And this as well, I would just add, from Energy Office leadership perspective, we have taken a look at the funding streams that we have and sort of funding eligibility for this sort of work, and are confident that we would have the funding to be able to do pretty robust investments in this area in order to make it work.
Awesome. Thank you, Will, and thank you, Adam. Any follow-up questions from board members for Will or Adam on that point? Sure, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. You might not have the answer yet, and I'm not sure if Adam's still on, but Will, you are. From a timing standpoint, so considering that this code should be ready to go by, what is it now, September, end of next summer, right around the corner, to be able to be developing these tools that would be available. And the reason I ask is, at least from Broomfield's standpoint, I've been given direction by my counsel is as soon as this document or code is ready to go, I'm going to be bringing it for review and potential adoption by the end of next year. So from a timing standpoint, and probably don't get an answer right now, but I'll be asking that as we move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, Tim, and I can just address that really quickly. So we do intend to be trying to develop some resource somewhat concurrently with this code. Obviously, like it's hard to develop anything that is final until we actually know what the final code is going to look like. And so, there may be some time delays from that perspective, but I think as we are starting to get a clearer picture of where the board is planning to take the code, we can start strategizing. And I think, a lot of this is going to involve outreach and engagement with design professionals and local governments to understand like what is needed. So I think a lot of that work can certainly start concurrently with our code development process, but that there might be some delay between the code being published and any kind of tool or resource being put out there, just because we need to have a final understanding of the code before we can look at it.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Great question, Tim. Ron?
Yeah, so I found myself reflecting a little bit after our conversation last time at how deeply complex this prescriptive code has become. And I was thinking in many ways, it kind of has undermined the value of having a prescriptive code at all, right? The idea of a prescriptive code is so you have a clear path forward and saying, okay, if I just follow this checklist, this list of what I need to do, I know how to build my building. But we've now gotten into this prescriptive pathway that involves, sort of this iterative process that is typically associated with figuring out how to comply with a performance pathway. So I guess I found myself wondering, maybe we don't want this at all. Maybe we want to just stick to performance pathways, because this prescriptive doesn't function like a prescriptive pathway any longer.
Thanks, Ron. Sorry, I think my computer just froze for a moment. I appreciate you sharing that point, and I think I might I'd just ask you to save that comment, and once we get into the meat of the discussion, I think that will be one of the many sort of pieces up in the air as we jump into C406 and what we want to do with it as a board. So, Adam, any response before you have to sign off today?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to share, Ron, is that we've gotten pretty clear input, from our engagement across the state about desire to retain a prescriptive pathway, and I totally agree with you and understand like the complexity and the challenges in making that hard to achieve, which is part of the intent and the goal behind creating resources to help streamline it and make it simpler again to comply with, even if you're not necessarily making the code simpler. So I just wanted to share that we have heard significant feedback from other parts of the state where performance paths are still more challenging in some cases, and the workforce is not necessarily as accessible in those areas for performance. So not necessarily weighing in one way or the other on that, but just wanted to share that we have gotten feedback in discussions on that specific topic in the past.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think that there is a real need for a simple, clear pathway for folks who are building in places where they don't have the kind of depth of design professionals and expertise that you might find in the Front Range. It just seems like, if we've gotten a prescriptive pathway that isn't really filling that role anyway because they can't navigate it, then I'm not sure we're actually achieving what they're hoping for anyway.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron, and thanks, Adam. Adam, I know you probably have to sign off. Hey, Adam, actually, before you sign off, Andre Hope from Shroom's Coda is a panelist. Do you mind elevating her? She might be in as Andre.
I was going to say that's weird because it says it's Hope, but because I did send Hope a panelist link, but yeah, I think Shannon will probably have to do it. But Shannon, if you could go ahead and promote Hope, Andre, whoever it is, to a panelist, that would be great.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, cool. Well,
I'm going to drop off. So
okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Adam. We'll report back. All right. So continuing on, we'll kind of go through meeting objectives, agenda, and approval of meeting minutes before we jump into today's discussion. So our objectives for the day are as follows. The first is that we want to give a chance to present the current structure of the renewable energy and load management table in C406. Since, as you guys may recall, last time we just covered the basics of the additional efficiency table in C406. Our second objective is to have you all give you all time to discuss and give us guidance on the total points required for compliance in C406 through the additional efficiency and renewable energy and load management credit tables. And then finally, our last objective of the day is to have you all review and discuss new credit options for C406 that were proposed by fellow board members. So how that shakes out into an agenda, we'll first approve our meeting minutes. We'll move quickly into a presentation on the renewable energy and load management credits, which we hope to keep brief. And then most of our time today will be in two different discussion sessions. The first will be what do we want to do with the C406 tables for additional efficiency, renewable energy and load management, and the minimum credit points that we need for compliance with the code. And then the second chunk of our discussion today will be to review board proposals for new credit options for C406. And we'll do sort of a board pitch, some discussion questions, and then some straw polling to get some guidance from you all on what you'd like to do there. We'll aim to save about 10 minutes for closing and next steps. We've got a couple of sort of important reminders for you all, as well as an ask for our next meeting to see if we want to extend the time to give you guys more of a chance to continue the commercial discussion before we wrap up. So that's where we're headed today. Any questions on where we're going? Not seeing any. Great. So we'll jump next into the approval of the meeting minutes. Before we make a motion to approve, I wanted to propose one edit, and thanks Tim for catching this and bringing this to our attention. So on page 3 of the meeting 11 meeting notes, there's a bullet just before the board discussion section on that page. And the bullet reads as follows: residential portion will still apply to 3-story or less for multifamily. The new requirement that we discussed for on-site renewables would only apply to the commercial portion, 4 stories or above. And then there was a sub bullet to that bullet that had an error in it, and you see I've corrected it on the slide here. The response to that was correct. In the original text, it said residential implications are only for those 4 stories and above, and that was meant to say commercial. So with that change, or we will make that change to the meeting minutes. And yeah, Ron, did you have a question?
I was just going to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as corrected.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ron. Do I have a second? All right.
Second from Kevin.
Second.
All right, I heard 3 seconds. So we got one from Kevin, Tim, and Carolyn. Thank you, guys. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes with the proposed edit on the slide, please say aye.
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 Wonderful. And any opposed, please say nay. Okay, not hearing any. Zach, did you have a question?
I did not. I'm sorry. I was just raising my hand.
Okay. And Zach, just to make sure we're tracking for meeting minutes, was that in support of approving the meeting minutes?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Zach. All right, great. Well, thank you, guys. So we'll make that change, resend the meeting minutes out to the board, so you all have the final copy, and then we'll get those posted on CEO's website. All right, so the next session we're going to move into is a quick presentation on the renewable energy and load management credit section in C406. Again, this is sort of a quick information session to give you guys an idea of what this section looks like as written in the code. Anna, I can't remember, am I passing the buck to you for these slides?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Let me know when I can advance them.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, so there are three ways that the board has proposed to take the Section C406 renewable and load management points. So these proposals are to remove the points. So just remove that table C406.1.2 completely. Change the points. So we could retain the energy storage and load management credits, but remove the renewable energy credits. Or reduce the points, generally explore lessening the points requirements given a statewide context. Any questions on the proposals or any clarifications?
And I would just note that these came through the original commercial code survey, and since that time, we've had a couple of different options and proposals come through discussions, which will be reflected on a future slide. This is just a reflection of what we got in that commercial code survey.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Okay, next slide. So this is table C406.1.2 as it currently stands. These renewable and load management requirements are mandatory. So they are required for the prescriptive and the performance pathways. You'll see that it's very similar to table C406.1.1 in that it has different points for different climate zones and occupancy. Go to the next slide. So these are the points that are available. It's a little bit confusing, but section C406.3 is the renewable and load management section of C406. So we went through section C406.3 and added up what the required points are for each climate zone. That's in the bolded column. Then we have the points that are available through renewables and the points that are available through load management. And load management are those credits that we talked about a while ago, things like HVAC load management for having demand responsive thermostats, demand responsive lighting, demand responsive domestic water heating if you have electric storage water heaters of a certain size. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. So just for clarity on this table, so the first column is the total requirements required per occupancy. And in comparison, that would be, those numbers are now higher than what's in the 2021.
There are no renewable and load management credits
Okay.
in the 2021.
Okay, that was my next question. So really the first table, or I'm sorry, the first column is new. It's only renewable and load management, which is not even required in the 21. So there's really a whole new set of requirements.
So there is the option to gain credits through renewables in the 2021, but now we have a separate table in the 2024 that says you have to achieve, for example, in climate zone 4B for a residential or for an R2 occupancy, you have to achieve 42 credits, including renewables or any of these load management options.
Okay, that answers my question. And were there some cost analysis done? I know I've asked that before. I think other board members have asked that, and I don't know if they had that available through the 24 IECC process.
I don't believe we have cost data available.
In my opinion, it'd be very important for the board to have something to show what the economic impact, the cost impact of going forward with this for making the decision. That's my opinion.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, I just wanted to urge you to clarify that load management includes additional efficiency measures. And for the board, as the efficiency member of the board, I feel the need to intervene here and explain to people that this is not just demand response. Utilities across our state do have demand response programs, but the ability to manage your load can include things like shifting your energy use to avoid those critical peak periods that can be extraordinarily expensive if you're a commercial customer paying demand charges on your rates, which many, if not most of the large ones do. So this has, in my mind, some of the largest potential to help our buildings save energy, save money, and help us meet our grid goals that we're going to need to get to by the 2030s. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So I would say the full breadth of these credits include not only load management for lighting and HVAC, we also have automated shading is an option, electric energy storage, so a battery storage system, cooling energy storage, service hot water storage, so providing storage for chilled water or domestic hot water. And then the final credit option is building thermal mass, so providing a mass building to store energy within the concrete itself. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. As you're going through that, I think one of the things in my mind, it's been a little while since I completed the survey, but you know, I think there's value in the things that are in this table. I think we've had some discussion about the potential of rolling it into options within the other, the 306 one. I can't do the numbers, you know, the other table, right? Because I think there's things in here that certainly are value that should be encouraged. I'm curious if we have an analysis of what's additive already, of what's in that other, in the other table, so that we can really be thoughtful about what we want to truly preserve. And then I think, you know, the issue here is it's required. And as opposed to providing flexibility. And so I think just getting some clarity around that would be helpful from my perspective.
Sorry, can you explain that last question you had, clarity around what's required?
No, so this one is really required.
Mandatory.
It's mandatory that you have to get points from this table, which is very, I mean, there's a lot of efficiency options as you just discussed, right? So there's ways to meet it. But it's very prescriptive in that it's mandatory, and then just understanding like where there's optional credits in 406.1.1. Yeah, I got the number right. Like what is really additive here relative to what is its counterpart in the optional section, so that we understand, like, if we really want to make sure that people are you know, doing the load shifting as was discussed, that we're featuring it and appropriately managing it in an optional credit table, right? So it's just like, where is the synergy, where's the overlap, additive, or something that's explicitly here that's not there?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I think we definitely have the C406.1.1 credits available later in the presentation. And so we can compare those points values to these ones.
And if it'd be helpful, I can roll to that slide now. I think those were just sort of bonus informational slides in case folks wanted to look at that stuff. So just let me know if it'd be helpful to roll back or roll to one of those slides to take a look.
I mean, I think eventually it will be. I mean, again, I think from my perspective, I appreciate the comments that my colleagues on the panel raised earlier about how complex this is, and it's you know, some interest in, you know, even potentially banning it. I mean, I think that there's value in the optional credits and crediting folks that are going above and beyond. So I have a desire to preserve it. I'm a little hesitant to be so prescriptive, though, as to require points under this very narrow set of options. And so I would favor doing away with this table, but rolling aspects of it into 406.1.1. That's certainly where I'm leaning. And so to do that, we need to understand like how to roll it in. And so we have to do some analysis of what's additive on top of the energy gains that we're already getting through the optional credits that exist in 406.1.1.
Thanks, Carolyn. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I have similar opinions to Carolyn, and I agree that there are credits within 406.3 that have value, but I've come up with 5 building types that would not have a path to compliance. Anything that is, a 24/7 type of facility cannot use the thermal mass credit, for example, because that G07, which by the way is a huge chunk of points for pretty much every building category here, G07 is only available to projects that are have 80% of the gross floor area unoccupied between midnight and 6 a.m. So any kind of 24/7 building like multifamily, call centers, 3-shift warehouse, grocery stores, anything that's 24/7 cannot use G07. So as soon as you take away that, there are many buildings that simply don't have a path to compliance. And we can't create an enforceable code. So I like the idea of still offering these credits and introducing the concepts of this, demand reduction. But I would like to see these things moved into, rolled into just the regular old C406 table and provided as options. But there's just many projects that can't use these credits. The like the HVAC and the water heating load shifting options only work if you have centralized systems. If you have a centralized cooling system, if you have a centralized water heating system. Think about all the buildings that don't. Again, a grocery store, an office building where maybe you just have a handful of tiny little water heaters on every level. Having a centralized cooling system is really moving away with what we're trying to do with, highly efficient split heat pumps and things like that. So there's just a lot of credits in there that are well intentioned, but aren't going to be applicable to a huge number of building types. And I think forcing people into trying to meet these credits, there are just many buildings that will not have a path to compliance if we're requiring these credits in this table. So that's my big issue with it.
So we did some analysis on a few building types, not that many, and we looked at a residential building complying under the commercial code and did find that they could comply with these renewable and load management credits.
If they have central systems, but
they did not. They had split heat pumps because you can do the individual thermostats that comply with these code sections, even if you don't have a central system that complies with section C406.3.3.
Thank you.
We can, but again, like there's issues with
there are, yes,
with
and
that,
I'm not
that,
to say
that
that there
maybe
aren't issues that the developers may have, and they may not want to go down that pathway. But
also like to force people, and I'll just say it doesn't work, to force people into temperature settings without their consent. They will hang cold washcloths on the thermostats and they will use their ovens for heating, like forcing people to without their consent to reduce their thermostat settings.
Hold on.
Well.
I don't think anybody wants to force anybody to be in an uncomfortable situation, but I think you're making some very broad claims here. And just to present an alternative perspective, I do support retaining these credits. And I don't think it's an all or nothing. We can certainly modify these credit requirements. You can introduce additional options to earn points that would make it easier to comply. We could reduce the point requirement. But this is such an important topic for Colorado for meeting our codes. We've already reduced the energy requirements for renewables. This code at the national level has already been weakened, and then to further weaken it by taking this out completely, I just can't support that.
And I should clarify, I don't want to take it out completely. I think I totally agree. There's great opportunity here. And I think I want to reflect the value of that, but I want to reflect the value of it without forcing it. because I do have concerns about that. I'd love to see these types of credits rolled into the primary table, and for these ones that we do think have value, to perhaps increase the point potential so that people look harder at it and can really think about it relative to some of the other options. Because I totally agree. Like, I would love to see this happen, but I worry about it a lot. I think there's a way to reflect the value and maybe incentivize it more than mandating it, and that would be more successful.
Be very Colorado.
Thanks, Elizabeth and Kristen. Will, I'll roll to you next.
Yeah. So I wanted to speak sort of generally about how important I think the load elements are, sort of coming from the perspective of somebody who spends a lot of my time working not on the building side, but on the electricity system side, and looking at the billions of dollars of investment that are going to be needed in the distribution system, and potential for load management to have really significant benefits in terms of reducing those investments and saving, very significant cost to electricity ratepayers. That's why the important distribution system legislation this year, Senate Bill 218, included virtual power plant requirements for Xcel Energy as part of that, and creating a VPP tariff specifically to support aggregated load management, essentially. And, I think it's really important to remember, we're talking about buildings that are going to be built, probably primarily starting in the later part of this decade, and we will be approaching an 80% renewable grid, where the value of load management is just going to be so important for helping to integrate those renewables at lower cost. So just from a sort of broad system perspective, I think the load management piece is really important. I'm somewhat agnostic, and we would need more analysis to understand the compliance implications and a little bit more understanding of what some of the cost trade-offs would be. But I would highly encourage us to keep some version of actual requirements on the load management side. Much less concerned about the customer cited renewables in a grid that's going to be 80% renewable. It's less important whether we're driving additional customer cited renewables, but I think driving load management is very important.
Thanks, Will. So, Anna, I think this was our last. We have one more information slide on this section, and you guys jumped the gun on the discussion, which is great and fine. But maybe we roll through this, and then we can kind of pose a question to the board to help frame the remainder of the discussion for this piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just highlighting again that these renewable and energy load management credits are mandatory for all projects, whether you are complying via the performance or the prescriptive pathway. So that includes projects that pursue C407 as a compliance pathway.
Awesome. I think that's it. Thanks, Anna. Okay, so now we'll just roll right into the discussion. Before we do so, we will hear a couple of board proposals as we move to today's session. And so the general rule of thumb that we're going to try to keep to as we ask board members to share their proposals is we'll allow 1 minute for a board member to share their proposal. We'll try to keep it 4 or 5 minutes for follow-up questions, Q&A, responses from the board member who proposed the suggested change to respond, a chance for them to respond to any board comments or questions. And then we'll be aiming to do straw poll voting today. So we'll try our best to follow this rule of thumb as we get into more of the specific proposals, but I just wanted to tee this up for everybody today. And I think that lends nicely into the first board proposal where which was from Elizabeth to strike this table. And we've already started to talk about this. So Elizabeth, I'll probably give you another moment to just share your rationale if this is still how you think we should manage this. And then I want to move to a slide where I can really try to frame this discussion so we can consider what our options are, allow all board members who haven't shared their perspective to share their perspective. Those who want to add to their perspectives can do so. And again, I'm hearing sort of split maybe differences in opinions on this particular topic. And so it'll just be important that we do some straw poll voting so we can understand where the majority of the board is leaning after this discussion today. So Elizabeth, do you want to add anything to what you shared earlier about this, or change what you had submitted originally in that commercial code survey?
Yeah, so these were my notes from, our first poll a couple months ago. But I do want to acknowledge and agree with the board members that have highlighted the importance of demand response, because you're right. When we say striking this table, I don't like the idea of having two different tables and two separate point totals that have to be achieved. And this is partly in the effort of simplification and planning and things like that, where it's it doubles the complexity of the prescriptive path. I still want the prescriptive path to be simple, and to have it be very obvious. It's difficult to try to calculate points and then overlapping points, and planning with the two tables is I don't like the idea of two tables. That's really the gist of it. But I do want to, like I said, I do want to acknowledge that yeah, you all are right. Those who spoke up about the importance of demand response. I would like to see if there's a way to integrate that into the first C406 table, the 406.2 tables instead. And perhaps then these requirements or these credits are weighted more heavily so that they are more attractive. But that then projects, if things don't work, or if they really, really don't want to do this, that they have to then extend efficiencies in other capacities to still keep their demand on the grid lower. That there's still ways to achieve that if they just can't do all of these things. So that's really what I'm going for here, is to try to still get the intent in a way that is simple and still open to all project types.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. So Carolyn and Kevin, I am going to call on you in just a moment. I think before I do that, I just wanted to share this slide, which is, I think, our team's sort of synthesis of where we think the options are falling right now for what we could do with this section. So option one sounds like it might be kind of pulled off the table, Elizabeth, from what your proposal just was. But that first option was to strike the table entirely. The second option there that we've heard from the board is to combine the tables and the points required. Option 3 would be to combine the tables but change the combined points required. So kind of like a both. Option 4 is to just leave the table splits and change points required. Option 5 is to do nothing with these tables, keep them as they are. And then option 6 could be something brought up by a board member today. So I just wanted to put these up on a slide to kind of help orient you guys to how we're hearing your guys' feedback and what we've heard thus far. And you guys can correct us if we didn't get this right. But also, I think it'll just be helpful framing as you guys are discussing what you want to do to try to align it with these options or an edit to one of these options so we can all follow along. So I will start with Carolyn, and we'll kind of open up board discussion on this, and we've got a solid 25 or so minutes to dive deep into this. So yeah, Carolyn, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate this. Elizabeth had mentioned something about like changing the points value or crediting to amplify them as one method. I don't believe we can do that in terms of EPCA compliance, because we need to keep the same energy target. But it does occur to me that one option we have, if we want to combine them into a single table, is to set some minimum thresholds for points that have to be earned in subcategories within the table. So it does provide some signal of importance while still preserving flexibility, and also not necessarily, we want to make sure that there's things within those subcategories that can still be met broadly. But I do think that's a pathway. So I guess maybe it's option 2 plus 6 here. So that's what I'm just pondering.
Thanks, Carolyn. Kevin.
So I guess 2 points about this. One of the things we have to be so careful with is so much was weakened between 21 and 24 and pushed into C406. So we have to have that in the larger context, like stepping way back, that fiddling with these diminishes where things got moved around. And then with regard to the question about moving 406.3 into 406.2, all of them, is it written in right now that there are limits to how much of 406.3 you can use? And if that's correct, then how would we accommodate that when we move it into 406.2? And the question really comes from my understanding of that was they didn't allow you to load up the thing with renewables under 406.3 and then still kind of have a crappy envelope or other elements of 406.2 requirements.
That's exactly right. So there's a table C406.1.1 parentheses 2. That is the limit to the energy efficiency credit carryover from section C406.3, the renewable and load management credits. So if we continue with our example of the R2 building in climate zone 4B, they are allowed to carry over 22 credits from the renewable and load management into general compliance pathway. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. So, but I guess that could apply. 406.1.1 could point to 406.2 instead for those specific credits. Is that how we would make it work if we combined?
That's a good question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so the board could put some language within section C406 that states from credits. Sorry, I don't have like all the H1, R01, G01, G02, blah, 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 through G07. The project could earn up to 25 points, or you could have a table from the compliance. There's the carryover table. Thank you, Kim. But we could have an up to kind of this 22 plus in our climate zone 4B R2 example, 22 plus the base credits required, which is, sorry. No, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. Da, 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 da. Sorry, I'm linking, my table is linking to the wrong. Here we go. Those are the limits. There we go. 22 plus the 42 required. So you could say you could have a table that says this is the maximum credits you can earn from these specific R01 through G07 and set limits that way. Does that make sense? Sorry, I stumbled through that.
No, I think I can see the way that could work.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I up?
You are.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I thought Kevin still had another comment. So I thought that another option that could have been on the table, and I think Carolyn may have brought this forward, is the importance of course, the renewable energy and load management, but to be able to move that, I guess that would be into 407 maybe, and give that as optional to allow that to be used but not require it. Is that not potentially one of the options on your list here, or would that be option 6 something else?
Tim, so just to, I'm sorry, I don't know that I followed that option. Do you mind restating that?
Sure. So I think Carolyn had brought this up as a potential changing it from required renewable energy and load management credits, which it is now, at least in the code, to move it over to the spot where it could be used as additional optional credits, and then possibly increase those or make it more palatable for a developer to go for that. So would that be on the table, or Would that be an option 6?
Tim, I would kind of see that, and Carolyn, correct me if I am misunderstanding. I would sort of see that as option 2 or 3, depending on what we did with the points. So you're basically moving the credit options from renewable energy and load management into a singular like point table, and then all of the additional efficiency points and all of the renewable energy and load management points would all be available to achieve one single point value requirement for the building.
Okay, then I think that would be in line with my thought, would be a recommended path to, then it becomes not required, but an option, but along with all the other options, if I got that right.
Yeah, I think I'm following. So
yes, that's verifying. And what my proposal was, Kim, you got it perfectly. And I'm not, I think changing the total points required, if we do that, is fine. My comment is that we can't like double the points for the demand management, like what they would be eligible towards. But we can certainly increase the points required once we combine the tables. I'm fine with that.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Tim. So I guess any other board members that want to weigh in on which ones of these options you're leaning towards or you like? Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, just to throw out one other option. A potential complication with, let's see, 1, 2, and 3 is that this also impacts C407. Unless we do something like what Carolyn suggested, where we've got, you still need to try to maybe hit some, a certain number of points in a category, or we put something separate to C407 to that respect. So I'm not sure if I have an opinion necessarily either way, but just to throw that out as something to consider with 1, 2, or 3.
Elizabeth, could you expand on that? On sort of the interaction with C407?
Sorry, I had to find a mute button. Yeah, and let me just pull this up. So in the mandatory requirements of C407, it does refer to this section. So if you go performance path, you're still required to meet C406.1.2, which is essentially the renewable energy and load management. So if as we modify either C406.1.2 or the tables, the C406.3 tables, these tables, we are also impacting what the C407 performance path mandatory requirements are. So basically, like as it reads right now, you have to do this no matter what pathway you go through.
The other item I would bring up in the interaction with section C407 is that the percentage of annual energy cost savings required is directly related to the number of points required in section C406 within table C406.1.1. So different building occupancies in different climate zones will require different percents of annual energy cost savings based on the efficiency, based on the number of points required in section C406. So if we add points or change the total required, we have to consider that it's also going to affect the savings required in section C407.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that would actually work to accommodate that. If we were to roll it in there, then I think you're right, Anna. Then it would still be accounted for. We wouldn't have that loss necessarily, or we wouldn't have a misalignment because the math would still math. It would just be a different point total. Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful.
Yeah. So if we, and just so everyone's following what Elizabeth is saying, if we roll all of the credits from C406.1.2, roll those into the C406.1.1 table and require more points. So you would require the points required in C406.1.2 plus the points in C406.1.1. You add those together, buildings that comply with section C407 are going to have to show additional annual energy cost savings to meet that higher point threshold listed in C406.
Anna, do you mind restating that with the tables instead of the numbers? I'm sorry, it's just really hard to follow.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, let me look up the names because I don't know.
And sorry,
Okay.
while you're looking for that, I was just looking for where in C407 that points back, and I wasn't able to find it. So if somebody
Sure.
has that handy, thank you.
Yeah, so that is on, if you're looking at the red lined version, that's going to be on page, it's equation 4-34 on page 474 of 887. And it's percent annual energy cost equals 100. I can go through the equation times parentheses 0.80 plus 0.025 minus the energy credits required in 406 divided by 1000. So if we go to those reference tables, Kim, that show the annual energy cost savings required, you can see how they change across climate zones and occupancies. They're further down. Keep going. Yes. Yeah. So you can see that the annual energy cost savings change based on the number of points required in C406. Does that clarify that, Kevin? Okay. So let me go through it one more time with the names of the tables. So if we add the points required from the renewable and load management credits to the energy credit, just the base code energy credit requirements, that will increase the total number of points required under section C406. Because that total number of energy credits required in section C406 directly relates to section C407, if we increase the points required in C406, C407 will require additional annual energy cost savings. Is that better, Kim?
Yes, thank you. I guess what I am not clear on is if we roll these two tables together and keep a minimum threshold that a certain number of points have to be met using the renewable, and I'm sorry guys for jumping between tables, there's so many tables and my computer's moving slow. Keeping a number of points required that you have to earn from the subsection of credits, which is the renewable and load management credits. Let's say they're all in the same section now. Would that necessarily change C407, or would there be a way to basically keep, like what I'm hearing, Carolyn, from you is that we want to kind of keep the structure roughly the same, right? So you have to get additional efficiency points, you have to get renewable points. They're just now in one table. So it kind of, it simplifies the opportunity, maybe?
As a clarification, I would not stand behind you have to get renewable points. I think my proposal is to allow for broad flexibility within the table, but to the extent that we really feel like the energy savings piece of that, which is, and demand management pieces are important, then we can set some minimum points that have to be achieved within a certain category of points. I still stand by our previous discussion around prescribing additional renewable energy or solar or storage in this code. I'm much more in favor of energy efficiency and peak demand reduction, those types of things within our code, allowing for designers to take credit for things like renewables and storage where it's appropriate for the project. So not requiring it, but also granting points for and some flexibility there. So that's what I'm advocating for.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Thanks, Rob. Jump in.
Sorry. if anybody else's brain is now scrambled eggs, I'm right with you. I guess the question that I have is if we're going to combine the tables, but then kind of change the number of points that can be pulled from any one of the line items within the now unified table, isn't that just basically creating two tables again? Are we just taking two tables, combining them in one table, but having you pick and choose which of those, having you only be able to select, like limiting the number of points you can get from any measure within that now consolidated table? I'm wondering if we're taking two tables, making them one table, and then effectively creating two tables from that one table again.
Yeah,
Am I scrambling everybody else's brains too?
Yeah, as a first proposal, I'm just advocating for combining them and allowing flexibility across.
Okay.
I'm not, I was offering a potential option, recognizing, it's been a little while, but I think Kristen and Will, both spoke quite a bit around, the importance of efficiency demand management in there. And so there is a way to signal that those are important by setting a minimum threshold, not in an area that we feel is really important. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the thing I would die on my sword on. But I want to at least throw it out there as if we wanted to accomplish what I heard from some of my panel colleagues around really emphasizing and making sure we don't give up on a subset of what's in the 406.3 table. Sorry, I don't know why I can't get numbers today, but like we want to preserve aspects of that and really emphasize them. One strategy, and we do this, so I'm offering this, the city of Boulder said, like, you need to get so many points from this group and so many points from this group as a way to make sure you're not, for example, just putting a bunch of solar on to get all of your points, or doing something else to get all of your points that isn't as impactful to our core goals. So I was just offering that as an option. My first foremost is to combine the two tables and potentially get rid of some of the points, depending on how that combines based on redundancies and how we feel where we ultimately land in our decision making around renewables.
Yeah, I think I would want a little bit more of a discussion on, or it would raise a concern for me that by combining the tables, it would provide a pathway to, I think it was Kevin's point. It would provide a pathway, frankly, to lazier building that you can just offset with a bunch of points.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So trying to sort of think about what I've heard so far and trying to understand where we're driving towards. I think there's the outstanding question of, do we want to combine tables, because it still seems like there's a little bit of an unclear, I think for some board members, like understanding of what the advantage of combining them. But for those who might be advocating for a table combination, it sounds like a couple of pieces might need to fall into place to make sure that we're not sacrificing efficiency for renewables or demand response or load management. So in that vein, if the tables were combined, perhaps there would be like a limit to how many points you could earn from renewable energy. Perhaps there would be a minimum amount of points that would be required from demand response and load management credits. But kind of what I feel like reading between the lines a little bit, those credits might need to live separately than the renewable ones as we're threshold. And then in addition, maybe there's another minimum threshold for efficiency points you have to get. So Rob, I hear what you're saying. It feels like we're sort of combining the tables to then have a difference within the tables again. But just trying to think through like.
Yeah, that'd be my interpretation. Because we've created a single table and then tiered that table, tiered a single table into stuff you have to pick from A, B, C, and D, and then we've got tables A, B, C, and D.
Thanks, Rob. Carolyn?
Yeah, and I'm not advocating necessarily to retain the renewables. In fact, I think I advocate against it and would still allow renewables to have a role in the performance above model baseline, but not necessarily included in the credit flexibility table. So, you know, as I made my proposal, I'm still sticking in my let's zero in on the efficiency. So I would retain storage and the demand management points from the 406.3 table, but not the renewable point. So not the points there, but the actual, like what the measures are that can get you those points and what their credits are from the other sections. Like I would retain those other than potentially the renewables.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to make a suggestion. I'm a real visual kind of guy when I do my plan reviews and codes, adoptions and everything. I would like to suggest that maybe we table this and possibly come up with 2 or 3 different scenarios of a combined table with whatever, a couple of changes with the points, and then let everybody have enough time to digest it. And we could talk about this for another hour, and without having something in front of my screen, I'm not going to be able to make an educated final or opinion, so to speak. That's my suggestion.
Thanks, Tim. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. Elizabeth, I'll go to you first before we dive into that.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion too. One of the reasons I like the thought of just simply combining the table, even if you don't change the points, is you won't be able to hit the combined points without some kind of demand response, right? Like something's going to happen. It also accomplishes 2 things. It saves you the math of having to calculate C406.3 table first and then saying, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to have 20 extra points that I can roll over into the C406.2 table. Like that's just going to happen organically by, the number of points. So it saves you some just confusion. The other thing is it can allow some flexibility for projects that will struggle to hit those demand response points and then could make up for it by doing some other things. So if we did nothing else other than combine that will save some headache. Now, it doesn't quite then address the C407 issue because, again, then we would have to achieve greater energy savings and it would be difficult to capture the benefit of demand response within the energy model without some additional modeling protocol to that, or perhaps we adjust simply adjust the formula there to kind of account for that in some way. Like I think there's a way that we could still make those align, but there's C407 is probably a discussion for another day because there's other things that don't quite align with C406 and C407. But I think that can be accounted for. But simply combining the table would simplify the process for design teams and just save some of the messy math.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. And Kevin, thanks for your comment in the chat. Required renewable load management reference tables. Yes.
Just because we're using these all interchangeably, and it would help to see the source of them. If I think I know, but would help.
Yeah.
To be sure.
Absolutely. So I think what I'm hearing, and I think I agree, this conversation is a little bit wacky when we're talking about tables, when there's so many point values in each table. And so I think what we can do is work as a team offline to come up with a couple of different combinations of how these point tables could be combined, and try to demonstrate in a much clearer visual how the points could or could not be added together in a single combined table. And so I think we can absolutely work on that offline and table this until the next meeting where we're able to get you guys a resource or something to look at before this to help kind of clear the scrambled eggs in everybody's brain. Does that sound like an okay approach, Elizabeth? I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is evident. If we all are confused by this, and I would say most of us are pretty good at energy codes, imagine the confusion that the design community is going to have around this. So anything we can do to add clarity and simplify that, I think will be really just beneficial to the design and construction industry. Because if we're confused, everyone's going to be confused.
And, I think that's a great point, Elizabeth, but I also think that when the new finalized version of the code comes out and we're not looking at this like terrible redlined version, it's going to be, while still difficult to digest, much easier than trying to read through the lines of what has changed.
Thanks,
I
Anna.
admire your optimism, Anna. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for at least diving into this. I guess I would love to do just one quick straw poll. Well, actually, no, I'm going to hold off on that. I was going to see if I could get a temperature check on if folks truly want to look at combining this table, or if people are sort of leaning towards like, let's just keep these the same and change point values. But I think before folks feel comfortable voting on that, it might be helpful to have some of those examples. So does that feel okay to folks? We'll put our heads together and come up with something to share back with you guys sooner than later so we can wrap up this discussion at the next meeting. Okay, final questions, comments, thoughts that you guys want to share in this regard before we jump to our next session of today's meeting. Okay. Yes, Mo.
I don't know if you saw Kim. Hope had a comment in the chat.
Thanks, Mo. Hope, just reading that quickly. Do you want to share that with the board or just elaborate on that point at all?
Sure. Just, I know there's a lot of confusion, as Anna alluded to, with all the strikeouts and blue lines and all of that. It can be confusing, but typically with all of the codes, there's a commentary that comes out, there's user information. And if the board decides that, combining tables or changing how it would be interpreted, those resources then kind of become obsolete and they're not usable for the end users trying to implement this code, whether you're a designer or a code official or a contractor. So just wanted to throw that out there, that I do know there's resources being developed for all of this.
Good point.
Thank you, Hope. Jesse?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you guys to everyone who's really knowledgeable on the technical side. I have to admit, I'm quite lost. But having said that, I'm wondering, is it possible within this group or within this board structure, or do we have the authority to create an ad hoc committee of our board members to when we get to a point, or if we run into another issue like this, to workshop this a little bit more? I guess it would probably still have to be posted. And now that I'm saying it out loud, there's probably rules around sunshine laws, et cetera. But it just seems to me like there's a more efficient way to try to address some of our goals here with the people in the room who are most experienced with this. So I'm just trying to think out loud about ways that we can move this forward.
Thanks, Jesse, for that. I am honestly not sure. And so I can, but I'm happy to follow up with Adam on that point and see what might be possible. I think from my understanding, something could be done where, every board member is invited to join a session where we're specifically talking about this topic. If board members cannot make it or don't want to be like active a part of the conversation, they don't have to join, but it would need to be publicly available, would need to be recorded and added to our schedule and made optional for the public to join. So I certainly think we could try to add another meeting with the board to try to dive deeper into this topic. And so that I think we could, but I would need to follow up and confirm with Adam on that. If it was possible, just quick show of hands, would there be board members interested in taking like having somewhat of an ad hoc meeting in addition to our regularly scheduled meetings to continue to work through this topic area? And if you're interested in that, if you could just raise your hand quickly, and then I can just get a sense if folks would want to participate in that. Okay. So I see about 4 or 5 of you have your hands raised. So thank you guys. I'll get back with Adam and see what he thinks and reach out to the board with more direction on that. Tim?
Yeah, my opinion would be these discussions need to be done with the full board to hash all this stuff out instead of subgroups. I really think that's important, that also for efficiency. I just think that it's the best method with the chosen board members things.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so immediate next steps on this, we will get with Adam, try to distill what we're hearing as options for combining these tables into some format that makes it easier for you all to see and understand and visualize where these points might be coming from if they were to be combined. And just, I guess, sort of try to simplify the conversation we had today so that everybody can follow along with what the proposals were and what has been suggested. I will ask Adam about an ad hoc committee, and if it feels like that's still necessary, we could vote on that at the start of a future meeting. But I think we will perhaps move on to our new credit options and table this for now until we can put together a cleaner resource for you all to have, to digest, to sit with, and then to better understand what you'd like to do with these sections. Kim?
I just wanted to chime in and say that I really appreciate Jesse's comment and understanding, or I can appreciate not being an expert, especially in the commercial codes. That's beyond where my expertise goes. But I also agree with Tim that I think it's important for everybody to understand, or at least understand the gist of what all of our board members who are experts are saying, in order to then vote with understanding of what we're voting on. So I think that is kind of the intent and importance, even though my brain is totally scrambled as well. So I do want to appreciate everybody who does understand these well enough to have this deeper level of conversation. I think that I just kind of wanted to chime in with, I think it would be helpful to see what options come back for combining the tables that wouldn't weaken the code at all, but might make it simpler, even if we choose to keep it the same, so that the IECC educational materials are beneficial to code officials and to the design community, etc. So I really appreciate Lotus's team being willing to take that on, because I think that will be helpful conversation, even if we choose not to go that route. So thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, and I will say, as our team puts our heads together on what those options look like, if, we may reach out to a few of you who suggested some of the table combination options, just so we make sure we are presenting and putting something together that reflects what this board was interested in. So yeah, let's table this. We'll circle back with you all on that. And for now, I'm going to move us on to the section where we're going to talk about proposed new options for credits within C406. So, as a reminder, this is the session where we're really going to try to keep to this structure and format as we review proposals. Hopefully these will be a little bit less complicated than the conversation we just dove into. But for each proposal, we'll give a board member 1 minute to share, give their pitch, what they want to do with a new credit option. We'll give around 5 minutes for Q&A from the board or any comments from board members. And I just want to emphasize, as we have just a limited amount of time to get through these, that try to keep your comments short and to the point so we can get through as many board questions and comments on each of these proposals as possible. And then we'll try to reserve the last minute for a straw poll vote. We have 5 proposals to talk through today and about 7 minutes to get through each one, which will bring us right to the top of the hour. So again, important that we stay timely as we move through these. Will, I saw your hand jump in there. Did you have a comment or a question before we jump in?
Yeah, do you have a slide showing the 5 proposals before we jump into the individual ones?
Sorry, was that, I missed the first part of your question. Well, do you want to look at all the proposals first before we jump into individual presentations?
Yeah, are you able to show what they all are before we jump in?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to do that.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'll just run through these proposals. They're on 3 slides, and then we'll roll back to the first one. So the first proposal is to offer optional credit for ultra-low global warming potential refrigerants that go above and beyond state and federal requirements. The second proposal is credit for having doors on refrigerated display cases. The third proposal is a new credit that provides points for each climate zone for using minimum efficiency heat pumps for space heating and cooling in accordance with the efficiency thresholds in C403.3. So I believe, just simplify this, this is sort of looking at adding that debiasing credit into the C406 tables. Proposal 4 is credit for projects designed to a passive house standard. And then the last one is credits for evaporative cooling. So those are the 5 that we'll be looking at, talking through, discussing. With that,
could I ask one other question? I'm sorry.
Please. Yeah,
so
go for it.
I know one other issue that I think Adam and I had raised was the 1.25 multiplier for buildings that don't have heat pumps. Would that be in a separate meeting rather than fitting into this discussion, or where does that fit?
Thanks, Will, for that question. So that was the plan to discuss after we had a decision or direction from the board on what we wanted to do with the point tables in C406. So I think, given that that is still an outstanding question, that was sort of part 2 of that discussion. So I guess I'm thinking that might need to, that part of the discussion might need to happen once we decide if we want to combine those tables or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry we didn't get to that piece of the discussion today. Okay, so my timer app for some reason isn't working on Zoom, so I'm going to use my phone to keep us roughly on time. But Kristen, I will pass it over to you for this first proposal.
Hi, everybody. So the concept here is simple. Buildings have a couple of sources of direct emissions in addition to electricity use, which is indirect emissions. Those direct emissions come from combustion of fossil fuels. So I really support the heat pump proposal that has come out. One of the other big sources is refrigerants. So our air conditioners, heat pumps, refrigeration systems use refrigerants that today can have thousands of times the impact of CO2 on global warming. So proposal number 1 is a very modest additional point that building designers could earn by opting for equipment that uses low global warming potential refrigerants. It's a proposal for 2 points for a GWP less than 150, and if you get GWP less than 15, 3 points. For context, DOE is currently working on commercial building heat pumps and RTUs with GWP less than 10. And then the second proposal here, really quickly, we've heard that certain store types may need additional point options. One just straight efficiency option is to include doors on refrigerated display cases. When you're at home, you would never leave your refrigerator door open all the time, but a lot of our supermarket designers do that. It saves a lot of energy. So this would be like a new point category under refrigerants and refrigeration systems. Again, well, I'll leave it at that for saving time.
Thanks, Kristen. appreciate you going into both proposals. So let's start with proposal 1. Would love to hear comments, questions. Oh, we'll start with proposal 1. Sorry, Carolyn. Comments, questions from the board on proposal 1. Do you guys like it? Do you have questions about it? Any thoughts? Elizabeth, I'll go to you first.
I do like it. Kristen, would you also consider projects that are using water for cooling rather than refrigerant to also qualify for this? So thinking like,
Yeah, like indirect systems?
geothermal, no, not indirect,
Oh,
but like
okay.
geothermal or water source heat pumps that use water instead of refrigerant.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm assuming yes, right? But you know,
Yeah.
maybe that would be considered because yeah, I totally see
Yeah.
that as a benefit. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, I just want to flag on this one that there is a new requirement that all refrigerants in heat pumps and HVAC systems are required to be A2Ls starting in 2025, which are some of those lower refrigerant GWPs.
Yeah, so the EPA tech transitions rule that just came out last year actually allows for a pretty high GWP, 750 over a 100-year period. And a lot of those refrigerants are like 2,000 over 20 years, which is the life of the equipment. So that's why I felt that this was perhaps needed. For context, environmental advocates had wanted like a 150 requirement, but for a lot of reasons, including lack of availability at a previous date, EPA opted to set that higher limit, which is why my proposal was the 150 or even lower.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Kevin, I'll go to you, and I don't know if you're going to share your comment in the chat, but yeah, go to you.
Well, it's similar. I think Kristen just addressed acknowledging what's coming when the refrigerant changes. It feels like this is a group that would know, but that is resulting in a lot of different changes for refrigerants threading down through buildings, particularly multifamily housing, because these new refrigerants need to be in dedicated shafts, rated shafts. And there's ventilation considerations and there's space considerations and all of that. So is the intent, Kristen, is in terms of how we would write this is, okay, acknowledge that the shafts and all that stuff's going to be part of the reality going forward. And then there's still a credit beyond this for better than standard. And I guess the second part of it, not to be too complicated, but we're hearing that a lot of equipment manufacturers don't even have this ready yet. So are we seeing that the market is turning enough that there's going to be a 3-year time frame where those are available with these better ones?
So what's happening is there's a sell-through period. So anything like manufactured up through next year can use the old high global warming potential refrigerant, and it can still be like imported and installed. But then starting next year, and this was a consensus position of AHRI, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, which is kind of the trade association for manufacturers. They're all switching in mass for the US markets. A lot of them are going to R32, which was one of the components in R410A. And the US, I hate to say it, is pretty behind the curve on this. Like Europe and Asia transitioned years ago. So there definitely are products that are available and that will be available by the deadline.
Yeah, and can I just add to that, Kristen? Specifically, the requirements that you're thinking of, Kevin, correspond directly to A2L refrigerants. So there are other refrigerants available with low GWPs that could be used in this equipment that would not require the same level of shafts and ventilation that are required for A2Ls.
Thank you. That's a good point too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Kristen and Anna. Any other comments, questions on proposal 1 before we roll into a quick straw poll? Okay, Kristen, any final notes from you before we poll?
No, thanks.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so the thing we are going to be straw polling as we move through these proposals is for our team to work with board members to develop code language for these new credit options. Note that the points for the credit options, we will be working with sort of, we will have to work with some technical teams to understand what those point values are. So your vote today is just, oh God, Sorry, my timer went off. Your vote today is just to give us direction to include these proposals when we give you our first commercial code draft in a month or so. So for anyone who would like to move forward with including a new credit option for proposal 1 that you see on your slide, please raise your hand now. Okie-dokie. All right, thanks everyone. I see 12 hands raised in support of including this as a credit option. You may lower your hands. For any board members who would not like to include this as a proposal in our code draft or as a new credit option in our code draft, please raise your hand now. Okay. All right, thank you both. I have 2 that are against. So that is a majority, and so we'll move forward with including this proposal language in our code draft. Thanks, Kristen. So moving on to
question, Kim, you got Elizabeth's proposing clarification, right? Just to make sure that carries forward as well. You know, so water source coolant.
Yes, we'll make sure that that's included. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to proposal 2. Let's offer up the floor for comments, questions for this proposal. Carolyn, move to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question. I totally agree with Kristen around the concept behind inclusion of doors. My question, maybe for our designers or others, is how much of that is included at the in the construction documents versus later finishes, just to understand that piece of it.
Yeah, Elizabeth, jump in if that's a response. Kevin.
Yeah, I can chime in at least on our part, our engagement on that question, since we do some grocery stores and things like that. It's a pretty well vetted design with the refrigerant elements, both for like, you know, the full refrigerant system as well as the end uses. It'll be difficult to influence. So I really like the idea of having this as a credit to at least get people thinking about it. But yes, we do have information on what all of those devices are. Like, you know, is it a 5-foot open case? Is it an 8-foot open case? All those things we do see.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Kevin?
Yeah, and I think quickly, Carolyn, like we have to accommodate that when you look at just the equipment load. Now, you go through CDs and you put together the equipment load and you anticipated equipment, and then somebody VEs the equipment and they have something different in there. Happens all the time. But you try to contemplate it in terms of heat gain or heat loss, extra heat from a space. So it's definitely part of the design process, but whether that translates to the construction process is a little bit different sometimes.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions on this proposal, comments from board members? Kim?
Just I guess a code official maybe question of if the occasion comes up where somebody earns the point in their design phase and they get their building permit, but then at final, but at least in hers language, final inspection, if something isn't the same and they don't then comply with that item, then they wouldn't get the points. Am I understanding that that's how it would work for this code as well? So if they didn't then comply with the number of points that they need to comply with the code, then they wouldn't get their building occupancy permit?
Yeah, Tim, jump in.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Hopefully the final inspection process would pick that up, going through those particular documents along with all the other items that the inspectors would need to be verifying at the final life safety, fire safety. So that's just one more thing on my plate when I'm going through and doing a final inspection. And hopefully they do it. And if not, then we kick it back. I don't think I, as a building official, would be not issuing a certificate of occupancy to a grocery store if that was the one item I would be working through a process to get them to comply, but still get them to open. Since if I don't give them the CO, I may be looking for a job at that same grocery store.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. Rob, I'll go to you next.
Sorry, yeah. So Elizabeth's point raised a question for me, which is how would we create these credits? Would we create them as like a binary thing, as if you have them or you don't? Do we do them by square foot, a type of refrigeration unit? If it's we have different points for a 5 foot versus an 8 foot to belabor her example. I'm interested to know how we would find a way to credit those. I mean, I do want to, going back to proposal one, I do want to note that I don't think we need to call out water as a refrigerant, because it is already classified as a refrigerant with global warming potential less than 1. So I don't know that we need to call it out specifically.
Yeah, I think there could be some flexibility around that. Like, for example, if 2/3 of your refrigerant meet the criteria, and then you had one application where you didn't have something in a unit in a building with multiple units, then you get 2/3 of the credit. And perhaps same could be said of the refrigerated display cases with versus with outdoors. But at this point, these are big picture proposals. We could certainly flesh out a lot more before bringing it to the board for a vote.
Thanks, Kristen. That's going to keep getting me right on time. That is the end of our sort of 5 minutes. So any final comments, questions from the board on the second proposal from Kristen? Okay, great. Not seeing any. So we'll do the same vote. Those in favor of adding this as a credit option, please, proposal 2 as a credit option, please raise your hands now. Okay, thanks everyone. I see 11 hands raised in support. You can lower your hands. And then board members that are against including this as a credit option, please raise your hands now. By this, I mean board members against including proposal 2 as a credit option, please raise your hand now. Okay, and I see 0 hands raised against. I think with the 11 support, that is a majority of the board members we have here. So we'll move forward with considering how to include this in as a new credit option in C406. All right, moving through to proposal 3. Will, I will pass it over to you for this one. And you've got a minute on the clock. Will, there you are.
Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute there.
All good.
So the idea here is really, a credit for all electric buildings with heat pumps, buildings that utilize minimum efficiency heat pumps for space and water heating are inherently more efficient than ones that utilize minimum efficiency gas furnaces and water heaters. The ICC, as currently written, allows a building that uses minimum efficiency heat pumps and a building that uses minimum efficiency non-electric equipment to meet the code equally. This is flawed and sort of biases the code, since the building that uses more efficient equipment for space heating and water heating is more efficient. So including this as a credit option that'll provide credit to all electric buildings that select the minimum efficiency heat pumps to recognize and give credit for the fact that they're more efficient than their non-electric counterparts. So I see this as part of the code debiasing approach. That's basic idea.
Great, thank you, Will. All right, so with that, we'll open the floor to comments, questions from the board on this proposal. Kevin, go for it.
I'd just say I generally support this.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Kristen?
I would too, and I think this is in line with a lot of the stakeholder comments that we received if people are reviewing those.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm also in support, but Will, could you provide any additional information just on what you mean by minimum efficiency heat pumps for space heating, cooling? Like, is that like a cold climate performance kind of what you have in mind there? Can you clarify that?
Yep. So I think the idea is to make sure that we are not running afoul of EPCA, and so by minimum efficiency, not requiring the use of heat pumps that are more efficient than a minimum standard set by DOE. That's
my interpretation is that this is explicitly requiring code minimum non-code climate heat.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Elizabeth?
I think so. So like a baseline efficiency package terminal heat pump, for example, that meets federal minimum efficiency standards could still get points for this, even though it doesn't have any, even though it's not a hugely efficient system, but because it's an all electric heat pump, even if it doesn't have cold climate performance, would still qualify.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Any other comments or questions from the board? Yeah, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I'm thinking now of just different building types. Would that also, let's say you've got like a VAV system that maybe it has a heat pump element at the air handler up on the roof, but is still using, say, electric reheat throughout. Would you have any kind of minimum heat pump capacity for the building or something like that? Or is it just if you're, if my VAV system has a heat pump coil, it counts even if it's doing a lot of electric resistance? Any issues there? Like, are you intending to roll that type of system in with this?
So great question, and I'm not sure that I have a great answer to that. I think that's an issue we would need to look at in actually designing the credit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Elizabeth, just to sort of build on that quickly, I mean, do you have a recommended way you would structure that if you were to support this in addition?
I don't. It would be just like a question of definition, though. Like if we didn't intend to have those systems be rolled into this credit, how would we define a cutoff or a threshold for systems that do use, say, maybe they've got a little bit of heat pump, but they also use a lot of electric resistance? Like, would we be defining how much electric resistance is okay and to still meet this credit? How much of the building's load would need to be carried by the heat pump coil, and would that be a part of that credit? And that, like you said, well, that could be worked out in as we develop this, but just wondering if you had any initial thoughts to that, because I don't think I do, but I can see that as a complication.
Hey, I can add some, I think maybe a little bit of clarity to what I think Will and Adam were thinking of when they were coming up with this proposal, is that the equipment that can be that is listed within section C403, so within those tables, would have to be heat pumps, and they're allowed to have backup resistance heat. So items like VAVs with electric heat, those aren't listed in section C403, all of those mandatory compliance tables, was my understanding of this credit.
But the air handler would be. It would just be like
But the air handler would be. Yes.
And then,
exactly.
But then like if there's reheat, if there's preheat, how do those things come into play? And we can talk through all that, but
we can, but I think that's like the general idea is anything that's listed within section C403 for mandatory efficiency would have to be a heat pump. And then those additional kind of reheat items that aren't listed in section C403 for mandatory efficiency requirements would not be included within the requirements of this credit. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, that helps. And would there also be like, is this an all or nothing kind of credit? Or is this a partial credit by load?
It's a good question.
Things to work out, but Elizabeth, we're noting your questions so we can circle back to them.
I do still like it though.
Okay. Rob, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, quick. I'd be interested in knowing what the design temperatures are across Colorado's climate zones, what the design temperatures are for 80% of the heating load, to kind of get a sense of what what cutover temperatures we'd be looking at for that.
Anna, is that a question you might be able to answer?
Can you repeat that, Rob? I'm sorry, I was typing back to Kevin in the chat.
That's, yeah. I'm interested in knowing what the design temperature would be for the 80% of the annual space heating load across different climate zones within Colorado. Maybe I'm not asking that.
80%. So you're saying that 80% of the building's heating hours, what is the minimum temperature of that 80%?
Correct.
Okay.
Across Colorado's climate zones, because we have, I think, 4 or 5.
I can probably figure that out. I can probably figure that out pretty easy. Yeah, not like right now, but yes, I can figure that out.
No, I get it. I understand. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Rob. All right, Brad, yeah, jump in. Oh, Brad, I don't know if it's me, but I do not hear any sound coming through for you. Still nothing. Still nothing. Sorry, Brad. Yeah, your sound doesn't appear to be working, but if you want to drop if it's only a short one, or reconnect and hopefully we can get you. Just feel free to raise your hand again when you think you've got your audio sorted. Okay. Awesome. Final call for comments, questions on this proposal. Brad, if you want to try again without your headphones, I'm sorry, I'm seeing you navigate all the pieces over there.
He noted that he was going to type it in the chat.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so I think with that, let's go ahead and do our initial straw poll so we can get through our final 2 proposals today. Board members in favor of our team integrating proposal 3 as a new credit option in 06, please raise your hand. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I see 10 hands raised in support. You can lower your hands. All right. Board members who would not like to include proposal 3 as a new credit option in C406, please raise your hand. Okay. See 1 hand raised against. Thank you, Tom. And then Rob, just noting your comment in the chat that you're abstaining from voting until we get the design temperature load calcs from Anna, which we can follow up with. Okay, so it sounds like that is a sort of a majority in favor of including this, so we will move forward including this as a new credit option. And we'll roll along to our final 2 proposals. So Kevin, feel free to talk about these one at a time, or if you'd like to do what Kristen did and just present them both at once, that works too. But I'll pass the floor to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I sent a question to Hope and Anna, and I know they're like superhuman, but even they couldn't turn around and answer this quick. For my question for the first one really had to do with those credits like EO2 to EO6 or something like that, where we are requiring, well, it's in 406.2 right now, that table, which we're under discussion on, but all of those credits address things that would be part of passive house design. So UA reduction, reduced air leakage, better insulation for walls and roofs, and improved fenestration. And I was just trying to judge how close that is to a passive house standard. And if it's substantially below a passive house standard, might we consider an additional credit if it were designed to a passive house standard? So it'd be pretty similar to the proposal 8 that we received, where somebody asked, hey, if you had something that followed NGBS standards and hit silver, could that suffice?
Great, thanks, Kevin. Do you want to pause there and we'll go through, we'll do proposal 5 next?
Yeah, and the second one might even be shorter because I couldn't really find anywhere, and I think it might really fall more under residential code because of evaporative cooling can be so effective in Colorado. could we approach a credit for that? I kind of trolled through the code, and the only few places I found where true evaporative cooling, not evaporative condensing units, was located was maybe in like 403.3.2, where it's just about performance requirements for heat rejection. And like I say, maybe, I don't know if Tom or I forget who our plumbing rep was, are on, but they may be able to say, like, this just doesn't even exist in the commercial environment ever. But I could see a large commercial warehouse where design temperatures might have some range, and it could be a really energy efficient way to just provide a credit for evaporative cooling.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. So why don't we start with proposal 4, and we'll kind of repeat Kevin's questions. Tom, I did see your hand up, so when we get to 5, I'll circle back to you. Comments, questions on proposal 4, and Rob, I see your hand's been up for a minute, so I will jump to you first.
Yeah. I've been passive house adjacent for 10 years or so right now. And the problem with either of the passive standards, FIAS or PHI, is that they really struggle to fit within the context of an energy code. They're just two entirely different. I would be more inclined to just do what Massachusetts does and just say passive house and PHI are code compliance matters, period.
And not have that as an additional credit, Rob.
Correct. If you, I mean, we can go to use Massachusetts as an example, and just if you meet the design criteria for one of the passive standards, that's a code. You're good to go on the energy code.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Any additional comments, questions on proposal 4? Or Anna or Hope, I don't know if you guys have any additional context. I know Kevin sent that question to you guys.
I started,
like an hour ago.
It's okay. I started trying to look through the language and see what I could equate, but I am going to echo what Rob said in that they are the requirements of passive house are much different than what the code requires, and we could try and draw some line to them to really understand what the impact is. But I agree with Rob that they're very hard to equate to one another.
Understood.
Anna, Elizabeth?
Yeah, well, I like crediting projects for, exceeding standards, but I think we'd have to consider that as soon as we open the door to any particular brand, like Passive House, as achieving credits, that we have to open that up to any other brand of green building certification as achieving the standards. So while I love this, I think I would vote no for this, because I think it opens the door, it opens a can of worms for, now LEED's going to want a credit, and NGBS and Energy Star, like everybody's going to want a piece of that pie. And I don't think we can show brand favoritism in that way.
Well, that's a great point, Elizabeth. I hadn't thought of that, and it gets to be a slippery slope because there's some pretty dodgy standards out there that could come along and say, hey, if you meet I won't name a name, but if you meet the standard and it's a 4 of those things, that somehow and it actually is worse than code.
Right. I don't think we want to be in the business of deciding which ones are, good enough or not. Even though I do like the passive house standard, that would be a difficult issue.
Great point. I'm happy to withdraw that for consideration. I hadn't considered it in that way. So just in the interest of time, if other people have comments, please do.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. We'll go to Tim, and then I think we can maybe move to proposal 5.
Okay. Are we commenting on proposal 5 or 4 or 5 or?
Well, it's I guess if you have any final comments on proposal 4, it sounds like Kevin is rescinding his proposal. So unless you would like to advocate for keeping it in, Tim, I think we could move on to 5.
Okay, because I have a comment for 5. So,
okay, wonderful.
Sorry. It was a great concept, Kevin, with 4. With the evaporative cooling, I'm in agreement with that. Very, very limited use. You know, on the probably single family is the only time I've ever seen that being used. I don't recall seeing that on commercial. I used to see that on commercial kitchens quite often back in the legacy code days, before the energy code started really taking off like a jet plane. You know, where you're bringing in that cold air, and the cooking people love that, even in the winter, or especially in the summer. But I think that could be a possibility for adding a credit for that, but just, I guess it'd be on the residential side.
Thanks, Tim. And Tom, your hand was raised. Sorry, Carolyn, I'm going to jump to Tom because he had his hand up earlier. So Tom, we'll go to you first, and then we'll jump to Carolyn.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of Proposal 5. You do still see it in the commercial world, especially in warehouses. It's doesn't use the energy. It's cheap. It's simple. There's no ambiguity with how it would get enforced. And anywhere we can make it work, I think would be good.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Carolyn, and then we'll go to Elizabeth.
Yeah, the only thing I want to offer, I'm not opposed to including it at all, just acknowledging that in portions of our state, we're already starting to see kind of loss of efficacy of evaporative cooling. So you just need to really factor that into however we do points allocations, especially as we think about climate zones, just because we know in more humid areas, we're already having to see, you know, some dehumidification coupled with evaporative cooling for it to be able to achieve the cooling capacity necessary on particularly hot days. So just want to make sure we're cognizant of that going into a points crediting. Again, I'm a huge fan of evaporative cooling and agree with all the comments made. And I agree, you know, we particularly see them on like schools that have cooling, or, you know, larger areas from an efficiency standpoint. So it's definitely in market and worth considering and encouraging it still.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I am in favor of this as well. That there's going to be some wordsmithing required, though, because technically evaporative cooling isn't actually mechanical cooling as defined by the mechanical code. It's not cooling. So we'd have to think about how to define that, and how to still show it as a benefit, because you don't really use it in places where you would use mechanical cooling, as you know, as far as actually changing the temperature of the air per se. But I think there's a lot of ways, and I still see it a lot in commercial environments. And again, not necessarily replacing like a DX coil, except in just a few cases, like a makeup air unit for a kitchen hood. We see a DX being replaced with an evaporative element in there quite a lot. That's terrific. You get to get great energy savings there. We also see evaporative pre-cooling, where you still have a DX element there. I'd love to see credits for that. So I'd love to vet this out further. We just have to be careful about the wording.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry, just to add some clarification, I know we're running up against time, Kim, is that evaporatively cooled condensing units are included in section C403, right? So I think the categories you're talking about here are evaporatively cooled condensing units, direct evap, or indirect evap. And I'll stop.
Yeah, and I spotted that in 403.3.2, but it really only responded to fan horsepower as part of it.
They're in the efficiency tables too. I'll send them to you, Kevin.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I am going to call a straw poll vote so I can make sure we wrap us up on time today. So for those in favor of including Proposal 5 as a credit option in C406, please raise your hand. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. Great. Okay, I see 12 hands raised in support. Thank you, everybody. Any board members that would like to vote against including Proposal 5 as a new option in C406, please raise your hand now. Okay, not seeing any hands, so it looks like all board members who voted support including this. So we will we'll work with you guys to figure out what that looks like as a new credit option in C406. Okay, so we've got 4 minutes left. Awesome job getting through all those proposals today, everybody. That feels really good to have checked those off. So thanks for your, oh God. Thanks for your concise comments today. So I'll quickly go through our next steps. So this is an important one. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, August 22nd from 9 to 11 a.m. In this meeting, we're going to attempt to wrap up C406 and have our discussion around C407. Our PM team is quite nervous that 2 hours is not enough to wrap up all of our commercial code discussions and do it well. And so we wanted to ask the board if you guys would be okay with moving this meeting to be a 3-hour meeting. And I know that that is a lot, but we are only asking for it for this one meeting, at least for now. Our 2 options to extend the time would be to add an hour on the front or the back end of this meeting. So I would ask you guys right now to please pull up your calendars. Look at if that time, one of those times would work for you. And if so, I'm going to launch a poll to see if you guys, which time would work best. Yeah, Carolyn.
And just a clarification, I think you meant Thursday, right? I'm trying to figure out if the two, I think I have it as Thursday.
No, you're right. That's a typo on the side. As you guys to not add any more confusion, I'll just do that right now. So thank you. Yes. Okay. So I am going to launch this poll. If you guys can please take a look at your calendars and answer our 2 questions. 1, would you be willing to do it? A 3-hour meeting, and then 2, what time slot would work better for you? If so, this would just be super helpful for
So we can't vote. It's not letting me vote. It says host and panelists cannot vote.
Oh, shoot.
So
okay.
why don't you just straw poll us with hands?
We're straw polling. All right. Hands up if you would like to extend the next meeting for 3 hours. That'll be our first question. Please raise your hand. We'll do majority vote. All righty. Great. I see 11 hands raised in support, so that's a majority. So we will plan to extend the meeting for 3 hours. If you prefer option 1, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., please raise your hand now. And when I say prefer, if you can do both, please raise your hand for both, because I just, that will just be easiest for us. So 5 folks can do option 1. You guys can lower your hands. Any board members that can do option 2, please raise your hand now. Okay, wonderful. I've got 12 hands for option 2. So we will extend the meeting time from 9 to noon for our next meeting, which is Thursday, August 22nd. So thank you guys, and really, really, really appreciate in advance your extra hour. I think it'll help us wrap up this conversation nicely. A couple more next step items, and then I'll answer any outstanding questions from folks. So our meeting minutes from this meeting will be sent out for you guys to review. As always, we'll vote on those at the start of the next meeting. We will also send out the revised meeting 11 notes that were approved during today's meeting. Reminder to please complete the C405-15 Renewable Energy Requirement Survey that is in you all's court by end of day this Friday, August 9th. I will say we've had about the same 8 board members take every single survey that we have sent out. If you are not one of those board members, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to please take the time to complete those surveys. Even if it's a cursory glance through, sharing your opinion where you have it is so helpful for our team as we look to draft our code proposals. Next reminder, we sent out the residential code survey to you all to complete. This is due the day after our next meeting, which is Friday, August 23rd. I know it can be so messy to be talking about commercial and then separately thinking about residential, but our timeline does not give us another option. So please, please, please carve out time on your calendars, focus time, whenever it might be now, so that you guys make sure you get that survey in. And as a reminder, we will be using that survey in the same way that we did for the commercial code elements. So we'll use that survey to really guide and frame our discussions around the residential code. So please, please, please do not forget to do that and carve out time to do it now. And with that, it's 101. So I will stop sharing. I will say thank you to you guys for what was a busy meeting of lots of things covered. We will follow up with resources, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and thanks for sticking in there with us.
Hey, Kim, could
Thanks,
I
everyone.
just ask you a quick question about the surveys? Because I think that was sent out while I was out of the office. So I just want to make sure I understand right. So this was your the Energy Code Board meeting number 12 agenda and pre-work email, I think, right? Where there was 3 different links, and now I'm not sure which one I've done and which one I haven't done. There's the C405 renewable energy survey. Is that completely different than the first survey that was 403, 404, 405?
Yes. So we had a C402 survey and a C403, 4, and 5 survey. That was so those were 2 surveys. The deadline for those has passed, and Elizabeth, I believe you responded to both.
Did I do this? Okay. Okay. So this is now a 3rd one that I have not yet done. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. The 405 is in follow-up to our discussion from the last meeting about how we want to change the renewable energy requirements. And so this is kind of, we got direction from the board that we want to move it into C406 and take it out of that section 40515. So the survey elaborates on that to ask like.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Can you feel free to nag us or remind us? Because I think I get surveys from the cohort 2 from you all, and I'm really confused. So feel free to resurface them and nag and say, hey, I know you generally meant to respond to this survey, so I'm guessing you forgot or missed it. So please nag us.
I will do that. And Kim, I see your chat. We'll
countdowns are fine.
Countdowns are fine.
Oh, good.
And then be kind when you reply and say, hey, you changed your you filled out the survey twice and changed your answer. Which one did you want? That could happen too.
The good news is you can't retake the survey if you've already submitted it. So you will know when you click on the link.
Oh, okay, good.
Good. That's helpful too.
Yeah. So yeah, I will resend a link, the links out to the surveys tomorrow, probably with the 2 that are live. So the renewable energy requirements and the residential one. So they're at the top of your guys' inbox.
Thank
you so much.
You're welcome.